Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, where you will discover practical strategies to inspire you to boost the health and nutrition of your kids. I'm Jessica Donovan, a qualified naturopath specialising in kids' health, and I want to make it as easy as possible for you to raise healthy and happy kids. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to the Natural Super Kids podcast. I am excited to introduce you to a fellow natural therapist today, a homeopath to be specific, Eugenie Kruger, who was just a delight to speak to, and she's just really inspired me to use homeopathy more. Again, I studied homeopathy as part of my studies to become a naturopath. It was one of the modalities that I studied, and I found it really hard to wrap my head around. Like, nutrition and herbal medicine made more sense to me, but I've personally had some really great results and experience with using homeopathy myself. So this chat with Eugenie has really inspired me to start utilizing this amazing modality again. So we talk about exactly what homeopathy is, and Eugenie really articulates this so well. And she just talks us through some of the really common remedies that she recommends for children for different ailments that I know many of you will be interested in. We talk about insect bites and stings. We talk about spring allergies. We talk about fever. We talk about tummy symptoms and so many other things, molluscum and other skin conditions. It's a great chat. I know you'll love it. Here's Eugenie. Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, Eugenie. It's so nice to have you here.
Hi, Jess. It's lovely to be on. Thanks for having me.
Oh, so excited about our chat all about homeopathy today. So can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you came to land on homeopathy?
Sure. Well, I like to think homeopathy found me. So I actually started out wanting to be a naturopath, and we were forced to do an introduction to homeopathy paper. And I always say forced because I tried to get out of it. I had no interest in homeopathy. I didn't actually even really know what it was. I couldn't get out of it. And I walked into that classroom very reluctantly. And after an hour, I walked out and straight to the registrar's office and changed my pathway to become a homeopath instead.
Wow.
So I just had this huge aha moment because my husband and I knew we were going to start trying for a family in the next couple of years. And when I heard that there is a natural medicine that is completely safe in pregnancy with no contraindications, you can use it on your baby from the second they are born, I was completely sold. And I was working in a health shop at the time, and I knew obviously that a lot of supplements and herbs and things are contraindicated in pregnancy. A lot of the herbs you can't use in babies under 2 or little kiddies under 2 years old. And so homeopathy was just blew my mind. So that's how homeopathy found me.
Oh, that's so good. And I studied homeopathy as part of my studies to become a naturopath. And I'm quite a logical, analytical thinker. So I struggled to get my head around homeopathy. So can you explain? I know a lot of people in our audience will have heard homeopathy, but I think a lot of people really struggle to understand it. So can you explain what homeopathy is and how it works?
Okay. So homeopathy is a form of natural medicine. I think that's always the easiest way to start the introduction because it actually can be very complicated. But basically, if you break it down to its essence, it's based on the principle of like cures like. That means something that could cause a symptom in a healthy person can cure that same symptom in a sick person. And I know when I say that, people's eyes just glaze over and they go, what on earth did she just say?
Yeah.
So I always like to follow that up with an example. So, Jess, I saw on your Facebook page you do like a good coffee. Have you ever had too much coffee?
Yes, definitely.
And how did it make you feel?
Well, I remember one incident after I'd done like a 6 or 8 week detox with no coffee, and then I had a cup of coffee and felt very jittery, anxious, heightened, the heart palpitations.
Exactly. So if I have a client that comes into my clinic and they say they're feeling anxious, they're feeling just very jittery, they have problems sleeping, I might give them the remedy coffea, which is made from coffee.
Mm.
So something that can cause symptoms in a healthy person. So giving coffee to a healthy person, it's causing them to feel jittery, maybe anxious, maybe having trouble sleeping. If you then give that in a homeopathic potency, which basically we take that coffee and we dilute and succuss it down past the point where it has any physical substance in it, only the energetic signature of that substance, and we give that energy back to your body. It's almost like holding a mirror up to your vital force and saying, hey, you need to just relax. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful remedy. I mean, we have over 8,000 different remedies, and I believe we're going to be talking about some of them today. But that would be a quick example of what homeopathy is and how you can use it in your life.
Yes, and you've just explained that so well. Like, I
Oh,
think that
yay.
makes it really easy to understand. I think the examples are so good, aren't they? And yeah, the coffee example is a great one. I think when I was learning first about homeopathy, I think arsenic was used as an example. And the homeopathic remedy arsenic, correct me if I'm wrong, like is for those same digestive symptoms that we would get, with arsenic poisoning.
Absolutely. Well, I've got lots more examples. I can give you the remedy, allium cepa, for example. Have you ever, oh, I know you have, chopped an onion in your life, Jess?
Yes, plenty.
Yes. And what happens when you chop an onion?
Your eyes water and start to like sting a little bit.
Exactly. Now, if I have somebody coming into my clinic with symptoms of hay fever, with streaming eyes, then I might give them the remedy allium cepa, which is made from the onion.
Mm.
So another example is the remedy apis, which is made from the honeybee, and it's a really great remedy for lots of redness and swelling. So I want to do just a little caveat here because I love bees. For anyone who's vegan and worried about animal substances used in homeopathy, we literally have to use one bee to make homeopathic remedies for the entire planet. That's been used for the last 200 years. So it is
Wow.
actually, if you want to talk about green, safe, sustainable medicine, I don't think anything beats homeopathy. Maybe Reiki or something like that, where it's like pure energy. But
Yeah.
few things beat homeopathy when it comes to sustainability and how green it is. So a few years ago, my kitties had conjunctivitis, and I used the remedy pulsatilla. Their symptoms cleared up within a couple of hours. But that night, about 2 a.m., I woke up and my eye was swollen shut, and it looked as if I had this big red golf ball in my eye. So I hadn't been stung by a bee. I just had a really severe case of conjunctivitis, and my symptoms were very different to my children. So I needed a different remedy. So I
Mm.
took the remedy apis because even though I hadn't been stung by a bee, it looked as if I had been stung by a bee because of the redness and the swelling. And of course, if a bee stings you, it will go really red and swell, be quite burning. A few doses of apis, my conjunctivitis was gone and my eye was back to normal. So that's just another example of how homeopathy works.
Wow, such great examples. And I just love how quick acting homeopathy can be, right?
So quick, so quick. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you've already alluded to this a little bit. Can you tell us a bit more about why homeopathy is so good for children in particular?
So for children in particular, definitely because you can literally give a homeopathic remedy to a child the second they are born. So if there has been a very traumatic birth, maybe a very fast birth, and baby comes out and they're a little bit stunned, their APGAR score might be quite low, and you can give them the homeopathic remedy aconite, which is really good for fright and shock, and that will just bring their vital force, alive. If there has been a forceps or a ventouse birth,
Mm.
and they've got a lot of bruising on their head, you can give them arnica the second they are born, and it will just take that bruising and that swelling right down and prevent any issues with head trauma further down the line. It's also, like I said, really cheap. And if you're a mum, the expenses can really add up. So, homeopathic remedy you can get from between 12 and sort of $20, and they'll usually have a couple of hundred pilules in there. It's also great because they are usually sucrose based. There's a few that are lactose based. So if you are lactose sensitive, just be careful. But my pilules are all sucrose based. You can also get them with just water and a bit of alcohol to preserve it. So, I mean, the kiddies love the sugar pilules. And Jess, you've probably seen this with your kiddies when they're teething, and they're in so much pain and they see the little chamomilla bottle coming. They'll open their little mouths and they get so excited. Um,
Yes.
and no need to worry about the sugar content because they're just teeny tiny little granules that you use. I particularly like it for children with autism or children with any sort of sensory issues or issues with textures, because you can put 2 pillules in their water bottle and shake the bottle and administer it to them that way, so they won't even know that they're getting it in. And that's, I mean, it's been a lifesaver with children with autism, because often you can't get the herbs and the supplements in them. They just flat out refuse. So you've just spent all these hundreds of dollars of supplements and they refuse to take it. So homeopathics for that subset of children is really very special. Yeah, I mean, I can make up some more reasons if you like, but those would be the main ones. They're sweet, they're cheap, the kids love them, they're effective, they've got no contraindications, they've got no side effects. Yeah, it's just a great medicine.
Yeah, so many great reasons. And I love that the compliance issue with things like nutrients and herbs that we work with a lot at Natural Super Kids can be really tricky for some kids. So yeah, that easy to take and actually being pleasant to take is such a big deal when it comes to kids.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the most common remedies. I know this is a huge question because there's so many remedies, but what are some of the more common remedies that you would use in children?
So yes, that is a huge topic. And actually, as I was sitting with this, I thought I'm just going to intuitively pick a couple of remedies and a couple of topics, and I'm going to trust that there's going to be a mum out there listening to this that's going to need to hear this, because I could literally talk about this for hours. But I mean, you could, I mean, I always say, I don't know how people do life with kids without homeopathy. I couldn't do life without homeopathy. So a number one would be obviously arnica. And they always say, God made arnica, so even the skeptics can believe in homeopathy. And many people who don't even, like homeopathics will still use arnica, or that have some sort of preconceived idea will still have used arnica at some stage in their life, because it's in most pharmacies and health shops. It's got a huge affinity with the cardiovascular system. So obviously any bumps, bruises, bleeding, accidents, it's a really good one. When the kiddies just start learning to walk and they're just a bit unsteady on their feet, 11, 12, 13, whatever months, and they're falling over a lot. And sometimes you're like, oh, was that one a fall that I should be worried about or not? And you can just give arnica anyway, just to kind of prevent any issues happening. It's obviously really good for after surgery to speed up healing. And of course, we haven't mentioned this, but you can use homeopathy on your pets as well. So we currently have a cat who's injured her tail, and she's having lots of arnica at the moment to just help with that healing as well.
Yeah, such a great example.
Yes. The next remedy I couldn't live without is Nux vomica. So Nux vomica is absolutely amazing for the time that I use it often is at birthday parties. So, especially you must have this, Jess, when your kids have a really clean diet and then they go to a birthday party, and you don't want to be that mum that never lets their kid have, nice things. So you let them have a few nice things, but they're going to go crazy afterwards. So what you do is you give them a dose of Nux vomica before they go to the party. And the second they leave the party, and then sort of every half an hour for about 4 doses after that, and there's no sugar crash. Or when you go and do trick-or-treating and you're like, oh, you just know the kid's got to have so much junk. Nux vomica before you go, maybe a couple of Nux vomicas like halfway through your trick-or-treating, and then a few doses afterwards, no crash. Or if your child is sensitive to gluten or something like that, if accidentally ingested some gluten, you can give them a dose of Nux vomica. It's really good for hangovers for the parents listening. Really good for any sort of overindulgence. That's the theme of the remedy, is overindulgence. So if you've eaten something you haven't normally eaten, if you're going to barley, it's really good for barley belly. It's really good for any sort of digestive upset. It's also really good for people who have constipation when they're traveling. And I know you went off in the caravan for 18 months or something like that. So if anyone's off on adventures and you find that, you just get constipated whenever you travel, Nux vomica is such a great remedy for that. And I just suddenly remembered that before the podcast, we were saying that we don't want to lose any of the listeners, because right now we're going to be using a lot of terms that many of you will be completely unfamiliar with, because our homeopathic remedy names are in Latin. So it's the Latin botanical or animal or mineral name of the substance is.
It's like another language, isn't it, to a lot of people?
It is another language, yes. So if we're saying words here that you've never heard in your life, please don't stress. Jess will guide you on how you can get a PDF with all these words that we've just mentioned.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. So the link to that will be in the show notes for anyone listening going, what are they talking about?
Absolutely. I have a couple more here I can run through for you if you want.
Yeah, go for it. I'd love you to.
Cool. Now, you mentioned about the remedy arsenicum, which is actually made from arsenic. And I know a lot of people are going to go, oh, you can't give arsenic to a child. But you have to remember this is the energetic frequency of arsenic. It's got none of the physical substance in it. So it's also a great one for tummy upsets and gastro. And I'm going to teach you a little trick, Jess. I don't know if you know this, but if one of the kids in the house or somebody in the household has gastro, you can treat that child with the remedy arsenic, but also give a dose to everyone else in the household to prevent them getting gastro. Or if your child has visited another child and the mum calls you that night and say, oh, my child's had gastro, just watch out for your child. Just give everyone in your family a dose of arsenicum and you won't get gastro. So we can also use it as a preventative, which is really great.
Yes, such a great tip.
Yeah. I've got another goodie that I love is the homeopathic remedy Ignatia, not to be confused with echinacea. So it's Ignatia and it's made from the St. Ignatius bean. It's a great remedy for grief, loss, and disappointment. Now, in WA, we have a lot of FIFO families, fly in, fly out. So the dads heads off to the mines for a couple of weeks and then they come back. And every time they leave, the kiddies, it's so traumatic for them saying goodbye. Or if your child is going off to daycare for the first time, or maybe something has happened after birth and mum and baby needs to be separated. So whenever you have that grief or loss due to a break of a bond, the remedy Ignatia is beautiful. It's also really great for grief or loss if you've actually lost somebody you know or maybe a pet. Ignatia helps you to move through that, and it doesn't numb any of the feelings of sadness. It actually just makes you know that things are going to be okay. So it just kind of lifts your spirit. It doesn't numb anything, so you're still feeling that, but not to in a productive way, I should say, instead of like a downward spiral way. Also really good if your breastfeeding journey has come to an end and you are very sad about it, maybe baby is sad about it, give a dose to bub and to mum to just help with that transition of weaning. So that's another time I really love it.
So many great examples, and I love
So
that
many
last
goodies.
one. Like, you can use it for emotional and mental health support as well as physical.
And Jess, you did a great podcast on molluscum. And we
Yes.
see so much molluscum these days. And as you were doing your podcast, I just wanted to say, I want to add in there the homeopathic remedy made from molluscum. So in a 200C potency, so we call this a nosode. So that's a remedy made from diseased tissue. So they've taken a scraping of the molluscum, they've turned it into a homeopathic remedy. I know all the EU factors are going off right now. Ooh, gross, how can you do that? But please remember, it's only the energetic signature of that that's left. The homeopathic remedy molluscum is amazing. So absolutely do all the amazing dietary and supplement requirements that Jess said in her podcast, which if you haven't listened to that one, it's great. I loved it. Also add your homeopathic molluscum 200C daily until the symptoms improve. And with, molluscum can be so hard to get rid of. And
Yes.
with this remedy, we managed to get them down to days or weeks instead of months or years. So it's a wonderful remedy that I've had such good success with in the clinic.
Wow, thank you so much for mentioning that. I've just written that one down because we see a lot of molluscum, and particularly because we're putting out, content podcast episodes and things. So we attract people like, and we get such good results. But there are those few cases that are really stubborn in terms of the treatment protocol that we recommend. And I did not know there was a homeopathic molluscum. So we will be utilizing that particularly for those tricky cases.
Well, I actually have this t-shirt. I'm not wearing it today, but it says I have a remedy for that, because literally there is not a thing on the planet that we don't have a homeopathic remedy for. So there's literally, and people, they'll try and test me. And I've got people to say, oh, have you got a remedy for this? Have you got a remedy for that? And we had a receptionist that used to say, Eugenie, have you got a remedy for? Have you got a remedy for? And a year after working for us, she eventually said, I'm not going to ask you if you've got a remedy for, because I know you do. I'm just going to say, what is the remedy for?
Yes.
So we eventually got around after a year.
Yes. Oh, and you're inspiring me. Like I don't use a lot of homeopathy personally. I use it from time to time, and I've used it in the past. But this conversation is definitely inspiring me to utilize homeopathy more. So you're such an inspiration for that.
Well, your podcast has inspired me, because especially with the zinc talk, I'm like, oh, I really need to include that a bit more with my kiddies as well. It's such an important supplement that I don't use enough. So that's what we're here for, to help and inspire each other. And hopefully all the mums and dads out there as well that want to feel more empowered and more in charge of their family's health.
Definitely. And it's just about having more tools in your tool belt, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's focus on some of the common issues that we see in kids and adults, really, through this sort of spring season and how we can use homeopathy for some of those things. So let's start with insect bites and stings, which are common through spring and summer as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We have lots of remedies for that too. One of the most spectacular stories I'll tell you about my son, and this was about 8 years ago. He had a insect bite on his ear. Something bit him on his ear, assuming an insect. His ear swelled to, I swear it was 10 times the size. He looked like Dumbo. And I tried the homeopathic remedy Apis, which is made from the honeybee. And after about 6 doses, I hadn't seen an improvement. And so I changed the remedy to the remedy Ledum, which is also really good for insect bites and stings. Did another 6 doses and no improvement. So I went to the doctor because at this stage I thought, let me just go get a second opinion because maybe I'm too close to this. Maybe there's something I'm missing. The doctor said, it's probably a white-tailed spider. I can give you an antibiotic and an antihistamine. I was like, thank you. See ya. Bye. Went past the homeopathic pharmacy, and this was in New Zealand, and we have more homeopathic pharmacies over there when I was still living there, and grabbed the remedy white-tailed spider, which is actually made from the white-tailed spider. Gave my son about 3 or 4 doses, and it started to go down. And after another 2 or 3 doses, his ear was back to normal. And I love giving that example because it's so often that people say, oh, I tried homeopathy and it didn't work. But, we've got 8,000 remedies. Sometimes you need to try more than 1 or 2 or 3 remedies to really get to that right remedy. And when I found the right one, the improvement was absolutely amazing. So I've just told you about 2 other remedies. First one is Apis, obviously really good for bee stings and wasp stings. There'll be a lot of redness and swelling or a burning sensation. It's also a really good remedy for anaphylaxis due to any cause. So whatever the cause was of the anaphylaxis, Apis is amazing. And I always am so careful when I say this. I am not saying don't seek medical advice.
Of
Absolutely
course.
seek medical advice. Have the EpiPen handy. But I've helped so many clients because let's face it, an EpiPen on a little kid is very traumatic. So if you can save them that, why wouldn't you? And you're also saving yourself, 100 and whatever dollars that it costs, unless it's, funded and it's about $40. So always be safe, always trust your instincts, always seek medical advice. I have said that. Now, I just want to say what you can do is give the remedy Apis in a 200C potency every minute for up to 10 doses. Obviously, if your child's in distress and the remedy is not helping, do all the medical treatments that you need to. But from personal experience with my husband, who just completely out of the blue had an allergic reaction to a bee sting a couple of years ago, and Apis massively helped him. And to all my clients who have managed to avoid using EpiPens with this remedy Apis, it's really worth having it on hand. So big one for that for sure. The homeopathic remedy Ledum as well. It's made from wild rosemary, really good for mosquito bites and also to prevent mosquito bites. So this is something, if you're traveling to an area where there's going to be a lot of mosquitoes, you can actually take a dose daily to make you less susceptible to mosquito bites, which is, just revolutionary for so many people. The remedy Staphysagria is the same. So some people find Ledum works really well. Some people find Staphysagria works better. We also have the remedy Culex musca, which is actually made from the mosquito. You kind of have to play around with those 3 and see which of those work best for you for prophylaxis as well as treatment. Jellyfish stings, something that we often see as well. If you're talking about bites and stings, the remedy Medusa, which is made from the jellyfish, you can use. But also the remedy Apis is really good for jellyfish stings. Have I missed anything? Oh, we also have a remedy histaminum, which is made from histamine. So if you are somebody that, gives a lot of antihistamines, you could try the homeopathic remedy made from histamine and just see how you go with that.
Yeah, and that sounds like it would be a good one for those people who really react to mosquito bites, that come up really red and
Yes.
inflamed, where an antihistamine would generally help bring that down. The homeopathic remedy, what was it called, did you say?
Histaminum.
Histaminum could be a
Yeah.
good one to try in those instances.
Absolutely. And for my clients who have high histamine in the body, I will actually give them the remedy histamine like about 3 times a week on an ongoing basis, often for several months at a time, just to help their body naturally, just calm down that histamine response. So it is a beautiful one that I use in my clinic on a regular basis.
Great. Gosh, I'm learning so much, and I know our listeners will be
Yay!
as well. What about those spring allergies, hay fever, the grass, dust, pollen allergies? What can we, how can we use homeopathy for these things?
Well, so we have a few goodies. I mentioned one of them. So allium cepa, the remedy made from the onion. And one of the main symptoms with that one is that the eyes will really be streaming. There's also a remedy euphrasia, which is made from this beautiful blue flower called eye bright. And it's really good for anything to do with eye symptoms, but they will also have quite streamy eyes, very itchy eyes. They'll just want to keep scratching their eyes or gouge their eyes out, with all the hay fever symptoms. You can actually put 2 pilules of this remedy in a glass of water, stir it, and then make an eye bath out of that. So you can use it topically as well, which is really
Topically.
great. Sabadilla is another one, and one of the keynotes for that one is just loads and loads of sneezing, and their nose will just be running like a tap.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's too tricky for you to think of which remedy to give, I do also make and sell homeopathic combination remedies. So you can find that on my website. And then that's got allium, cepa, euphrasia, and sabadilla, all 3 of them in one bottle. And sometimes it's just easier to just take that
Try
because
them all.
you're going to be
Yeah.
covered. And then, of course, we have homeopathic remedies made from grasses and pollens. So that's a really good one. We also have remedies made from cat hair, dog hair, dust mites, dust, anything you can think of, really. So if those are things that really trigger you, then the grasses and pollens remedy might be a really good one.
Yes. And so knowing what it is you're reacting to, I know I've had really good results with, like, personally with a grass remedy for kind of hay fever like symptoms. I think I shared this on the podcast in another conversation, but I never had hay fever. And then I was camping on this paddock in California in my 20s, and I obviously reacted to something and I got awful hay fever symptoms. And because I was camping, I just couldn't escape it. It was a horrible couple of days. And ever since then, I get these mild hay fever symptoms just for a couple of weeks at sort of end of November, early December. And so it's obviously something I'm reacting to. And I did have some good success with a particular grass remedy a few years ago. So obviously had that particular grass that I was reacting to in it.
That's so interesting. And of course, because homeopathy is like cures like, not same cures same, very often it doesn't actually have to be the correct grass. It can just be a grass, and that will be similar enough for your body to. I always say it's like holding up a mirror to your body and saying, "Hey, this thing that you're reacting to, it's actually fine. Here's the reflection of it. You can heal that." So, and something else that some people do, this is quite homeopathic, is if you, say, move to a new area and you suddenly becoming very allergic, leaving a glass of water outside, for a few hours to collect the pollens and things in the air and actually just drinking that water. So I haven't tried it myself. I don't have allergies, but that apparently can really work for some people. And obviously eating local honey is another really good one as well. So
Yes. Oh,
yeah.
such great tips. And I
Yay.
know so many families in our audience really struggle with those spring allergies, in their kids, and it can really affect your quality of life. Spring is such a lovely time of the year, but for so many people, it's not because of those spring allergies. So, yeah, I think homeopathic remedies are a great one to try for those kind of symptoms. And then I also would love to talk to you about fever. I don't know if you've listened to, I've done a podcast episode on fever and how fever has a beneficial effect in our kids. We shouldn't be too quick to react to a fever in terms of, rushing to those anti-fever medications, like paracetamol and ibuprofen, because, fever actually stimulates the immune system and helps the body to fight off the infection. But there are certain times, obviously, that we do want to do something about the fever, but we might not be ready to jump to the medications yet. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about using homeopathy in kids with fever.
Absolutely. It's a topic that's so close to my heart because fevers are so important, and we are told to fear them when really it's just actually a sign that your body is doing exactly as it should. And I love that saying that, giving Panadol for a fever is like shooting your guard dog when it's trying to warn you of an intruder.
Oh my
And
gosh.
and you won't believe this, Jess, or probably you will because of synchronicity, but literally the consultation that I had just finished before we started recording, this mum explained how her child had just had a fever and after that had this developmental leap. So she was a little bit delayed with her walking. She had a fever. And then suddenly after that, the child could walk and had 4 teeth pop through. So, so many people, I know a friend of mine who's a naturopath in New Zealand, she posted this picture once of her daughter's drawing before the fever and a drawing after the fever. And it looked like it was, a child 3 years older that had done the second drawing, because so often children will have developmental leaps because as their immune system fights the intruder, it's like it becomes smarter and it gets more educated. And so, sorry, I'm
So
preaching to the converted here,
fascinating.
I
Yeah.
know, but I am so passionate about fevers. And my kiddies are so, because I really try to empower my kids. They're 11 and almost 8 now, teaching them why I do what I do, because it's all good and well me do this. But if they don't understand why we're doing this, then when they leave my house, they are
Mm.
going to fall back. But if I can get them in tune with their body, so my kids now, when they get a fever, they just know exactly what their body is doing. And, I'm like, Joshy, can you feel those soldiers fighting in there, fighting the battle? Can you feel how hot it's getting in there? And he's like, yes, I can feel it. And, it's something that's really celebrated in our household. So sometimes though, and especially, I always have in my mind when I work, this this new mum who has this newborn baby in her hands, or this young little baby, and she's feeling so anxious because it's like, who has given me this child and what am I supposed to do with it? And literally, it's like, how do I keep this kid alive? And
Mm.
so we want to have something safe to fall back on. And obviously, the homeopathic remedy belladonna is so incredible to bring fevers down to a manageable level. So you have to remember the remedy is not going to take the fever away, because the fever is playing an important role. It's going to bring the fever down to a manageable level. So what you will see at home is when you give the belladonna, instead of your child being listless and burning up and possibly delirious, which is often seen, is often the remedy belladonna is useful for symptoms of delirium. So instead of your child, seeing balloons floating around and burning up and being so scared, when you give this remedy, the fever might not come down that much, but you'll see suddenly this child is playing with their toys. Suddenly they're a little bit interested in food or a little bit interested in water where previously they weren't. So that's what the remedy belladonna will do. It's not going to take away the fever completely. It's going to bring it down to a manageable level. The remedy aconite is also amazing for fevers. It's not. It's also a remedy that comes on very quickly. The symptoms come on very quickly, but it hasn't got that redness that belladonna has got. The remedy ferrum phos is another great fever remedy, but that's the fever for ferrum phos will it's more like a slow burn. And you'll see, oh, my child's just a little bit off. The fever is kind of just like 38-ish. It's not, they're just a little bit off, just a little bit of a fever. Then ferrum phos is one of your main remedies for that. Sorry, I feel like I just rambled on then, but fever is just something so close to my heart.
Yes, well, I'm super passionate about it as well. And I just like my daughter gets fevers when she gets sick. She's 12. Ever since right from the start, when she got sick, she'd get a fever. But she just gets over sickness so quickly, if you just sort
Exactly.
of let that fever go, and then the next day she's kind of good again. And of course you do need to be careful with fever. I'll link in the show notes to the episode, the full episode that I did on fever, if anyone's listening that wants to know a bit more. But yeah, again, it's having those tools in our tool belt so we don't have to necessarily like jump to the pharmaceutical medication too quickly. Of course, it has its place, but homeopathy can be so great when it comes to fever and, sickness and illness in children, which we've seen so much of this winter.
Oh, absolutely. And I always feel education smashes fear. So if you are
Mm.
fearful about if my child was to get meningitis or a fever or chickenpox or measles, if those things scare you and fear you, it make you fearful, go and do research on those. What are the symptoms to look out for? What are the homeopathic remedies and natural supplements that you can use to heal that? Make sure then that you have them in your home so that when those things happen, you don't then have to go and rush around and get these things. You are already prepared. And if you are prepared, that's half the battle won. Because the second your child gets sick, you're like, oh, it's actually fine. I've got everything right now here, right now. I know how to treat it. So don't wait until your child gets sick and then try to do the research. Do it beforehand. Make a little list of the things that you are most fearful of your child getting. Then get the remedies and get the natural supplements that are going to help your child get over that quicker.
Yes, because the quicker you can get them onto these natural, remedies, the better. You don't want to have to, wait and order them and wait for them to get delivered and, days go by. So yeah, that's such a great tip as
Yeah.
well.
Mm.
And I think that leads perfectly into my next question. And my last question was just about where people can find out more about you. You have your own podcast, which I'd love you to share about, and the services and things that you provide.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Jess. I really appreciate it. So you can find me at eugeniekruger.com. There's not that many of me. So if you just Google me, I'll probably come up. My podcast is Homeopathy Hangouts, and it's on all major podcasting platforms. We've released, I think, 107 episodes now. And that podcast is really a passion project. And Jess, I know you will agree with me on this. There's so much hard work that goes into creating a podcast, but it's because we're trying to empower parents and give them the knowledge to, embrace natural medicine. So on my podcast, I talk to homeopaths from around the world, also to mothers and just their successes that they've had with homeopathy. So because so few people in Australia, I should say, understand what homeopathy is, it's really just to give them a little glimpse of all the things that we can help with. Because, of course, homeopathy is very deeply embraced all across Europe. It's been used for 200 years. The British royal family has used homeopathy for 200 years. So many famous athletes like, Usain Bolt has used homeopathy pretty much all his life since he was about a teenager. I think about 16, he had a health issue and used it since. Cher, Paul McCartney, Jennifer Aniston. There's so many, famous people that use homeopathy. It's widely used in Brazil. There's Brazilian homeopathic doctors, same in South Africa. Of course, India, they actually have a minister of Ayush, which is Ayurvedic, yoga, of other things, and then homeopathy. So they actually have a minister in charge of homeopathy in their country. Thousands of homeopathic doctors in India. They have homeopathic hospitals. I've got quite a few podcasts on that where we talk with homeopathic cardiologists. So Dr. Adil Chimtanawala actually has a homeopathic cardiac hospital where they're treating major heart issues with homeopathy. And sorry, I get a little bit passionate about that as well. But yeah, feel free to go check out the episode. And we've got episodes there on fertility and colic and reflux and constipation and anything you can think of. And then I have a free course on YouTube. It's only 30 minutes and it will take you from complete newbie to confident home user in 30 minutes. And if you just type in Eugenie Kruger Homeopathy on YouTube, the video is called Homeopathy at Home. And you should be able to find it there. It's also on my website. So basically just go to my website. All the information's in there.
And you'll be able to get to everything there. And we'll make sure we link all of those things in the show notes, your podcast, your YouTube course, and your website as well. So thank you so much for joining me. It's been such a great conversation. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Head on over to our website, naturalsuperkids.com, for the show notes for this episode, as well as a whole heap of inspiration to help you raise healthy and happy kids. I'll see you next week.